We're back in lockdown again, Rust. I know. What are we going to do? Yes, it's official. As of midnight tonight, the UK is back in a national lockdown once again. Whoopee! I get why it's done and I agree with it, but it's still not a pleasant thing to have to go through. Anyway, we're not talking about that in this video. Today, I want to talk about an aspect of photography that I think is possibly one of the most talked about notions that's not actually properly talked about. Did that make any sense? I'm talking about the notion of when is it acceptable, in what scenarios is it acceptable to take photo or video? Obviously, within the law here, I'm not talking about in the middle of a playground full of children when you are neither a teacher or a parent. I'm talking about things like, commonly it's shows, events, concerts, etc., where you see people who will maybe be filming on their phone, or God forbid, a fucking tablet. You know, they'll film it on the phone to watch it back later, and they'll say that they want to relive the moment, but then people will say, yeah, but you weren't really in the moment when you were filming it because you were watching your phone, not the actual show. So therefore, rather than actually experiencing it, you're going to not experience it to film it to then remind yourself that you didn't experience it later. Or words to that effect. Now, I can't criticize people for doing that because I'll be honest, I've done it myself before. Now, that's not the reason why I'm bringing up this topic. I'm more bringing it up because I got hit with this same argument a couple of months ago for a completely different situation. I posted this photo on a photography group on social media. Now, as subscribers of this channel may already be aware, this is my daughter Era, who was born 3 months ago. This is actually her being born. Now, I didn't post that picture into the photography group for the praise of becoming a father, although I am very proud of becoming a father. I only posted it because of the photography aspect, the aesthetics of the photo itself. Now, the feedback in general for that photo was very positive. A lot of people were just congratulating me on Era being born. There were a lot of people praising the photo itself, but there were, unsurprisingly, a few people who weren't that keen on it, which I'm not blaming them for it. I fully appreciate and fully expected. It's quite a polarizing picture. However, there were a few people who weren't so much critical of the photo itself, but were more critical of me because I'd taken photos during the birth when they say I should have been there for my partner. Now, firstly, just to cover the argument of I should have been there for my partner, I was throughout the entire ordeal. You know, labor is not a 5-minute thing. We were in that delivery room for about 9 hours from Water's break into Era coming into this world. So I was there throughout that entire period. And it's not like I spent the entire 9 hours taking photos. I took a few photos early on before things had ever really kicked off. And then I didn't do anything until Era was kind of out in the world. You know, we'd got through the whole giving birth. Era was out. And when I was taking the picture, I was still at the end of the bed with my partner right there. So it's not like I just abandoned her. So I personally flat out reject the notion that I wasn't there supporting my partner because I was there throughout the entire ordeal, before, during, and after. Right? The fact that I took a photo or two during it doesn't mean that I wasn't there for her. And she was so hyped up on gas and air, she might have not even noticed if I was there or not. But that then rolls into this whole argument of, in any sort of situation like that, is it okay? Should you take pictures for prosperity, or should you just be there focused on the moment? And incidentally, actually, not long after I'd had that altercation, I then saw Jared Polin put out a very emotional video regarding, I hope I don't get this wrong, I believe it was his mother who'd passed away a few years ago. And he talked about the whole ordeal through her illness, etc., that he'd been taking pictures from the very start all the way through, but he didn't take photos right at the end. And he was regretting that decision. But watching that brought back that whole debate for me, thinking some people are going to be very critical of that notion of photographing a dying person when they're going through all this, and should you be taking photos and focused on taking photos, or should you be there in that moment? Now, personally, obviously it's all personal preferences here, but my personal preference is I think it's okay to side on the notion of taking photos as long as, one, it's not going to interfere directly with other people or they don't have any objections to it, and two, that it's not too excessive. So for my case, for example, I'd already spoken to my girlfriend well before the day of birth came around. We'd already had these conversations about photographing on the day. Her take on it is she's not really one for having a photo taken. Her personal take on it was she's going to be drugged up, so she's not actually going to care anyway. I'd obviously expressed that I'm a photographer. I want to take photographs, for memento. That's how I've always been. And especially with such an occasion, as far as I know, that could be the only time I'm ever in a delivery ward, or at least one where I'm the father, although that would be kind of awkward. And maybe some people will argue and say you could have waited a little bit after the birth, waited until everything had calmed down a little bit, and then you could have took some photos. But for me, I wanted to capture that very moment. And I get it's quite a arguably graphical image. But then that's kind of what childbirth is really like. Generally, whenever you see newborn photos, it's always the baby's very clean and sleepy and all wrapped up and covered up, and it's all very clinical. But that's not what childbirth is like at that time. It's not all sitting around having a tea party and then just boom, out pops a baby and off you go. It's very raw, it's very emotional, and it's very messy. And I wanted to capture that. I mean, admittedly, I toned it back a bit. The black and white version looks far less icky than the coloured one did. But I wanted to capture that moment, so I've got it for all eternity. And not just for my own prosperity, although yes, years to come, and I will be looking back on that photo and able to remember it. And let's not forget as well, generally as you get older, your memory does fade. How many times have you thought about something that's happened years before and you think you remember it in perfect detail until you see some pictures or some video footage from that same time, and then you suddenly start to remember details that you didn't realize you'd forgotten? And even from the point of view of my girlfriend's perspective, she was there in the room, but she didn't really witness any of it. So again, that to her is an aspect of the childbirth that she didn't witness. She never got a chance to witness that she then did see. Era was in the room with us at that time, but she is sure as hell not going to remember anything of her being born. Now, admittedly, I have absolutely no idea if in, 20 years' time she is going to want to see a picture of her coming into the world screaming and covered in goo. Sure, if I'd spent the entire several hours of labor taking photos, taking videos, and not actually being there, then yeah, that would be considered, I think, excessive. In the same way as going to a concert. If you want to capture a little bit of footage subtly so you're not disturbing other people, waving a fucking 7-inch tablet around in the air, as long as it's not interfering with other people and you're not there for an entire hour-and-a-half concert, then I don't think it's that much of a problem. I mean, hell, if somebody wants to pay to go to a concert and then not actually watch it because they're too busy filming it, that is their choice. For me, as long as it doesn't interfere with other people, then so be it, it's their decision. Although, to be fair, I have been to many concerts before over the years, and I can't remember most of them. I can remember going to them, but I can't remember the details of what actually happened, apart from the video clips that I took. Where there's been video clips that I took and I've watched them back later, I've remembered those clips and what songs they were more than I've remembered the actual show themselves. And let's be honest, if we didn't photograph things for prosperity, what exactly would be the point? You go back through any photo that you've taken, you'll remember that time when you took it. It'll jog your memory back, and that's the whole point, in the same way that people hire photographers for their wedding days because they want to relive that day, and they relive it in more detail when they can see the photos. So for me, as long as it's within the law and everyone involved is happy with it and it's not interfering with other people, then we should actively be encouraging people to photograph things for prosperity, whether it's their own personal use or for everyone else's as well. I think you maybe hit a bit more of a grey area if you're interfering with those around you or the people you're photographing aren't happy that you're photographing them, then obviously that's a little bit different. But otherwise, I have no objection. I don't see the problem with it. And I had a brilliant example from one of my Patreon backers as well. I put the question to them in advance of this video, asking if any of them had any suggestions of places that would be immoral to shoot within the law. And one of my Patreon backers shared a story where they were actually asked to take some photos at a funeral. And a lot of people probably wouldn't consider or dare even attempt to take photos at a wedding. At a wedding? They're the same thing. Not during the actual funeral, but more afterwards. But, you know, that was a case where those involved asked for it, were happy, actively wanted it. And where's the problem with that? If that's what people want, go nuts for it. But those are just my thoughts and opinions. What do you think? Do you agree with me or do you disagree? And if so, why? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already and you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.